Could the Glazers stay on as Manchester United's owners and secure minority investment? That's the story that we're hearing this week from ESPN and Mark Ogden. And the markets have reacted. The share price of United has crashed. Is it realistic? I don't think it is. Not from a business sense, because of where Manchester United are after 20 years of ownership by the Glazers. And I'm going to explain exactly why in this video and run through the facts and the figures that I don't think really match up, especially when you've got Sheikh Jassim and you've got Jim Ratcliffe and their offers on the table. I'll explain it all in this video. Please, if you do learn something, join the United People's TV community. I'd love to have you on board. I covered this whole thing in as much detail as I possibly can, and I will continue to do so. Now, over the weekend was when we heard, it's not the first time, we've heard Elliott Management Group, Ares is another investment firm that's been linked with buying Manchester United in a minority takeover. And now Carlisle over the weekend, their name was thrown into the hat. And everybody was like, well, that's a bit random. Where's that come from? And we didn't know whether we kind of felt like it was a negotiation tactic. And this definitely, in my opinion, feels like a negotiation tactic from the Glazers. Mark Ogden with the story yesterday from ESPN. I'll run through it in the main talking points. Bear in mind that this is only coming from Mark Ogden at this moment in time. Maybe there's going to be others that come forward. But this is a one-source story right now. This is what he's saying. Joel and Avram Glazer are increasingly confident of securing the outside investment that will enable them to remain as Manchester United's owners and potentially double the value of the club over the next decade. And we go down here. And this is the most important part of it. While United supporters who have been opposed to the Glazers since their leverage takeover 18 years ago made it clear that we want a full sale, a source familiar with the situation has told ESPN that brothers Joel and Avram favour new investment that will enable them to remain in charge at Old Trafford, with siblings and fellow directors Kevin, Brian, Edward and Darcy offloading their stakes in the club. That's not gone down very well. Not with the fans, not with the market itself. You look at how Manchester United's share price has reacted off the back of one article. A 10% drop. Now, I'm sure that might change when the market's New York Stock Exchange opens a little bit later today. But a significant... That chart there is over the last 5 days. You can look here. That's over the last month. And you can look here over the last 6 months. And if you want, go a little bit further. Go and look at a year. And you can see where the spike happened here. When the Glazers said they were going to sell the club. And you can see how it's being reacted. This is in Bloomberg. This is in Sky News as well. And lots of fans are worried, right? And I understand the worry. Now, this is not the first time that this has happened, by the way. Back in March, I think it was after Man United won the League Cup final, and reports came that the Glazers were considering staying on at the club. The shares dropped by 10% then as well, the second time. It's almost like the Glazers are the problem. It's almost like they're the reason we are in this position. And I'm not sure that their egos allow them to actually physically see that. I really, really don't. In terms of where we are at this point, all this context is really important before I get to the crux of this video. And why I don't think there's any, in my opinion, I don't feel like there's much of a need to worry in this situation. We know that Sheikh Jassim has already submitted his second bid. And we know full well that it's gone to that third round of bids. And that's the position we are currently in. What is it? 10 days now we've got until we heard that 28th of April deadline that these third and final round of bids will be going in. Now, this is where I want to discuss this idea here, right? The idea that Joel and Avram will favour new investment and that Kevin, Brian, Edward and Darcy, they would sell their shares. Because we take a look at this, right? This is from the latest SEC filing, which is required because Manchester United are a public limited company on the New York Stock Exchange. And it details, you can't see the names fully down there because I can't get it on the screen. We've got Avram, Joel, Kevin, Brian, Darcy and Edward, all the Glazers. And these are their shares. Let's get this up here. Let's get that off there. These are their shares here, right? 16 million, 21 million, 15 million, 19 million, 20 million, and 15. In fact, no, sorry. Ignore all of that. Ignore all of that completely because we are only interested. My bad. We are only interested in these. Right? That is Kevin, Brian, Darcy, and Edward. And if you put those four together, it's around about 71 million shares. So this is the interesting part here. If you were to look at Manchester United's value, their share value right now, 20. Let's call it 20 for all intents and purposes. That would mean that if somebody wanted to buy out, all hypothetical here, this concept of minority investment, this concept of those four siblings selling their shares and Joel and Avram staying in the club. That's 71 million shares, priced at 20. It's around about $1.4, $1.5 billion, there or thereabouts. And these are all hypothetical numbers, of course, but I'm trying to explain to you why this concept doesn't really make sense. It doesn't match up. So that means that somebody would need to pay $1.5 billion to buy out those four. And then those four names will be scratched off the list. Gone, 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 gone. And somebody new would come in. It's a really weird question mark. Somebody new would come in and take, and there'll be a new person there. Okay, so that minority investment, they paid $1.5 billion to buy those out. Okay, Man United go and build a new stadium. There is no investment because that's not investing anything. So if this hypothetical situation exists, right, and somebody has to pay $1.5 billion to buy out those four, and then they need to invest on top of that in the region of $1 to $2 billion for the new stadium, for the new training ground, for the men's investment, for the female investment, for the academy investment, and anything else in between. You're looking at somewhere in the region of $3 to $4 billion for a minority investment. And Avram and Joel still want to retain voting power and ownership. So you're telling me that they are looking for somebody, and they are. Let's go back over to the ESPN article over here. Their words, not mine. They are confident of finding somebody to pay $1.5 billion to buy out their siblings, investing the money required, because I don't actually think the concept of Manchester United doubling in value is an outrageous concept. However, for that to happen, is going to require a significant amount of investment. New stadium required, new training ground required, infrastructure, all the other infrastructure improvements required. The men's team investment, female investment, academy, all the sorts of investment. There's going to have to be billions and billions spent for Manchester United to double in value. I don't think it's an outrageous concept. It would just cost a lot to get there. So the idea that Abraham and Joel will find somebody to pay $1.5 billion to buy out their siblings, plus call it $1 to $2 billion for investment. So that's totaling $3 to $4 billion. And for that person or that company, whoever it is, to then go, yeah, we don't need the voting power. You can just, it's mind-boggling. And the idea, and this is hilarious as well, the idea that they're confident they can double their money and get to 10 billion. If this happens, and let's say for example, the way that they raise it would be to introduce new shares. They would dilute the amount of ownership that they'd have, therefore reducing how much they own. Therefore, even if they double it, they get less from it anyway. None of the numbers stack up. And if you look at, if you go down here and you can look at the Aerial Investments, they sold off 3 million shares back in January, right? There. Because Man United's share price absolutely soared back in January. So they sold at this point here. They sold at 23. So they made a good decision at this point in time anyway. Despite all of this, Jamie Jackson here in The Guardian with a report saying that Sheikh Jassim is absolutely confident of this deal going through. And I don't know whether it's going to be Sheikh Jassim or it's going to be Jim Ratcliffe. And that is still completely up in the air. But I am pretty confident that there's no chance it doesn't make any sense. It's not a minority. It's technically a minority in the idea that they want to retain ownership. But we're still talking about billions and billions and billions. And for somebody to do that without having that voting. They're not going to do that. It doesn't stack up. It really doesn't stack up. And it's why this protest that goes ahead before the Aston Villa game on the 30th of April at Old Trafford, if you can, it kicks off at 2. I'm sure the protest will probably start at 1 p.m. before. I don't know the details about it. The 1958 will release it, and I'll speak to them about it. Go to that protest if you can. Have your voice heard. Because this just, to me, feels like the Glazers trying to squeeze some more out of Sheikh Jassim, to squeeze some more out of Jim Ratcliffe. And in my, I'm not a financial expert. I'm just looking at the numbers and putting it all together and going, that doesn't really make any sense. How? And I don't think it does. So I personally wouldn't be too worried about it. I think you're just witnessing a game, a really high-stake game with Manchester United at the end of it. And that's what makes it worse, because we're attached to the club. Maybe I should try and speak to somebody who's got a little bit more insight into this from a financial perspective. Maybe I'll speak to Kieran Maguire. You can let me know what you think in the comments below. Whether this video is, I don't know, you've learned something from this video, or there's a comment you want to leave with a question. You know where to go. And Glazers, you know where to go as well. Get out.